Winter had draped itself over our little neighborhood like a familiar, scratchy old blanket, doing its best to instill a sense of holiday cheer despite its threadbare appearance. The air was crisp and edged with the promise of snow, and festive lights twinkled from eaves like stars that had wandered too close to earth. It was the time of year when peace should have settled in like a cat curled by the fire, but instead it seemed restless, prowling just out of reach. The cookie-cutter homes of our HOA community stood in orderly rows, each one a mirror of the next, save for the personal touches that dotted their facades: wreaths, strings of colored lights, plastic reindeer poised awkwardly on lawns. Amidst this cheerful sameness there was Karen, a fixture as immutable as the North Star, guiding or perhaps goading our little community through her own unwavering principles. Karen was a force of nature, as relentless as the winter wind. Her eyes were sharp, always scanning for infractions with the intensity of a hawk searching for prey. Her voice, though rarely raised, carried the weight of authority as if she held dominion over more than just the neighborhood watch. Her presence was a constant reminder that the invisible hand of order was ever hovering, ready to correct any perceived descent into chaos. It was during one such day, when the air was heavy with the scent of pine and promise, that I found myself at the epicenter of Karen's latest storm. I had been stringing lights along the eaves of my house, the ladder steady beneath my feet, each bulb a tiny beacon against the encroaching evening. My thoughts were far away, wandering through the memory of seasons past, when a shadow fell across my task. Her approach was silent, a specter cloaked in a puffer jacket, and I was caught unawares. Turning, I offered what I thought was a simple, harmless greeting, a phrase woven into the fabric of our diverse little community: "Happy Holidays." The words hung in the air between us, innocuous and friendly, or so I had thought. But Karen's eyes narrowed, the corners of her mouth tightening as though she were grappling with an affront too great to bear. Silence stretched, taut as a wire under tension, and then she was gone, retreating as quickly as she'd appeared, leaving only the bite of cold air and the sense that something had shifted. Life went on, though the peace of the season now felt more like a truce, uneasy and fragile. I went about my days, the memory of our encounter slipping into the background noise of holiday preparations. Yet there she was, always watching, her gaze a palpable pressure that seemed to follow me through my daily routine. It was early one evening, not long after dusk, that the sound of sirens rose above the gentle hum of festive activity. The flashing lights cut through the night, painting the neighborhood in surreal washes of red and blue. There was confusion, a cacophony of hushed voices, and curious eyes peering from behind curtain-draped windows. Karen stood in her driveway, arms crossed, a figure of defiant rectitude cast in the glow of emergency lights. Her accusation, leveled at me, echoed through the chill air, absurd and almost laughable if not for the gravity behind her words. Disrespecting Christmas. As the officers approached, their expressions a mix of confusion and duty, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the kind of calm that comes when you realize you've become an unwitting player in someone else's drama, a bystander to the bizarre machinations of a mind caught in its own self-righteous storm. I met their eyes with quiet resolve, a silent understanding passing between us. There are battles worth fighting, and then there are those best left to unravel on their own. The absurdity of it all hung in the air, a delicate balance between irony and inevitability. In the end, the sirens faded, the officers departing with bemused expressions and a few polite words. The neighborhood settled back into its uneasy peace, the night once more quiet save for the distant rustle of wind through the trees. And so, the season went on. Karen's presence a constant reminder of the curious dance between order and chaos. Her actions a testament to the unpredictable nature of human conviction. The irony was not lost on me, and as I stood beneath the stars, I couldn't help but wonder what the next act of this unintended play might bring. The winter chill bit at my cheeks as I stepped out to retrieve the mail, the frosty air a reminder of the season that Karen seemed to clutch so fiercely. The HOA newsletter lay at the top of the stack, a beacon of petty bureaucracy wrapped in festive red and green. New regulations was emblazoned across the front as if they were gifts to unwrap and cherish. Inside I found a list, a litany of absurdities, each one more incredulous than the last. The tinsel on my roof could only be a certain shade of green. Lights must twinkle at a uniform pace, lest they disturb the peace. And, most ridiculous of all, every greeting must conclude with a mention of Christmas. A mandatory verbal ode to Yuletide that was as joyless as it was forced. Karen had outdone herself. The newsletter was her brush, our lives her canvas, one where she painted strokes of control. This was her retaliation, her way to reign supreme over our little neighborhood kingdom. I could almost feel her shrill satisfaction in each bullet point, a symphony of petty triumph. Burning in the back of my mind, I could see the memory of her expression when she called the police for my harmless holiday wish. It was a look of vindication, of a battle won in her private war. She was the self-proclaimed defender of Christmas, yet her actions spoke of anything but goodwill. Days trickled by, and the neighborhood seemed to constrict under her rule. Citations appeared like unwanted guests on doorsteps, each one a badge of dishonor for minor infractions. Mrs. Thompson received one for her garden gnome dressed in a Santa hat, a supposed affront to the sanctity of traditional decor. The Johnsons next door were accused of playing festive music too loudly during their annual party, a joyous gathering now tinged with trepidation. The wariness spread, a cold mist of paranoia as stories circulated in hushed whispers. Karen had been seen peering from behind her curtains, clipboard in hand, like a hawk waiting for the slightest misstep. Her power fed on fear, growing as she pruned our freedoms with meticulous precision. In the grocery line, I overheard fragments of her latest escapades, each anecdote more absurd than the last. Her disdain for inflatable snowmen, her campaign against colored lights that blinked too brightly. It was a portrait of obsession, painted with strokes of overreach and a palette of festive tyranny. I found myself at the center of these tales, the instigator of her newfound crusade. Neighbors offered sympathetic nods, their eyes weary from the constant scrutiny. I hadn't intended to become a symbol of resistance. I merely desired to celebrate in my own quiet way. But now, my simple wish had become a catalyst for change, a beacon of sanity amidst her madness. As the days passed, the irony was not lost on me. Karen, in her fervor to protect Christmas, had stripped it of its joy, leaving only the hollow shell of obligation. She had taken a season of unity and turned it into a battleground, where every greeting was a skirmish, every decoration a declaration. Yet, within me, a quiet resolve began to blossom. I had no grand plans or schemes, just a simple truth that echoed against the clamor of her reign. In the end, it was not the regulations or citations that would break us, but the absence of cheer, the hollowness of enforced conformity. And so I waited, watched, and as the first flakes of snow kissed the ground, I felt a shift, a subtle stirring of resistance, gentle but undeniable, as others began to question and quietly defy. My journey was just beginning, and Karen, for all her bluster and bravado, would soon find that some spirits are unbreakable. The winter sun hung low in the sky, its pale light casting elongated shadows across the neighborhood. There was a cold bite in the air, a seasonal reminder that the year was drawing to a close. The stark, skeletal trees in the park swayed gently, as if whispering secrets among themselves. I walked home, my mind a beehive of thoughts, buzzing with the absurdity of it all. Karen had taken it too far this time. After the police departed, shaking their heads at the misuse of their time, a quiet determination settled within me. The air smelled of pine and distant wood smoke, grounding me, centering me. My heart no longer raced with the indignation of the encounter. Instead, it paced steadily, plotting. The community had long been Karen's stage, her domain, where she spun her narratives with the flair of a soap opera director. But this was different. This was personal. As I reached my front porch, the holiday lights twinkling in a spectrum of colors, I paused. I imagined the glow of each bulb as a silent sentinel, watching over this absurd theater of suburban life. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside and began my preparations. The soft hum of my laptop powering up was a comforting sound, promising an avenue for resolution. I created a document, a digital ledger of grievances and absurdities, chronicling the many instances where Karen had inserted herself into the lives of her neighbors with the precision of a conductor leading a discordant orchestra. Each entry was a memory, vivid and clear. The time she demanded a neighbor repaint their front door because it wasn't the right shade of red, or when she halted a child's birthday party claiming the laughter was disturbingly loud. Each instance was a brushstroke in the portrait of a woman who had, somehow, mistaken authority for power. As I typed, the rhythm of the keys became a meditation. The document swelled with evidence, a testament to the community's collective endurance of Karen's antics. My fingers danced across the keyboard, tapping out a cadence of quiet rebellion. There was a certain irony in preparing this subtle counter. It felt like constructing a paper boat, delicate yet capable of weathering the stormy waters of Karen's tyranny. The plan was simple: present the document at the next HOA meeting, not as an act of aggression, but as a narrative for change. I imagined the scene in my mind. The long table, the uncomfortable folding chairs, the expectant faces of neighbors gathered under the fluorescent glare. Karen, sitting like a smug queen upon her self-appointed throne, blissfully unaware of the tide turning beneath her feet. The corners of my mouth lifted at the thought. The meeting would not be about revenge. It would be about liberation, about reclaiming our community from the clutches of one woman's misplaced fervor. I envisioned myself standing, document in hand, the room hushed and waiting. That was the moment to speak, to let Karen hear the voice of the neighborhood, echoing back her own absurdities like a chorus of defiant songbirds. As evening fell, the sky painted in shades of indigo, I closed my laptop. I felt the resolve settle in my bones, as solid as the earth beneath the snow-dusted ground. This was more than just a defense of a festive greeting. It was the first step in reclaiming our peace, in reminding Karen that respect was a two-way street. The quiet settled in, wrapping around me like a warm mantle as I prepared for bed. Tomorrow would be a new day, a chance to turn the page and begin the next chapter in this unfolding tale of neighborhood resilience. My eyes closed with the gentle certainty that, come the meeting, we would stand united, our voices harmonizing in a singular declaration: enough. The winter sun draped its golden warmth across the neighborhood, but a chill lingered in the air from the previous evening's crescendo of tension. The lawns, immaculate and bordered by rows of almost mechanical precision, whispered of order and conformity. Yet beneath this facade, chaos simmered. Karen's outburst had left ripples across the neighborhood pond, each resident catching a glimpse of their reflection in the turbulent waters. Her accusation had echoed in minds not just as a petty grievance, but as a testament to the undercurrents of intolerance festering beneath the surface pleasantries. This was more than a battle over holiday greetings. It was a skirmish for understanding and acceptance in the shadow of rigidity. I had always found solace in the quiet power of preparation. My steps were deliberate, my decisions calculated. As I sat at my kitchen table, a cup of steaming tea warming my hands, I perused the documents before me. The clock's hands moved with unhurried grace, marking time yet feeling detached from it. Detached. I was familiar with the bylaws that governed our enclave, having penned them in partnership with the founders long before Karen's arrival. Karen, with her zeal and conviction, had misjudged her footing on this ground. She had waged war on principles she barely understood but thought she controlled. The irony was not lost on me. A storm brewed in a teacup indeed, but underestimating the consequences of a tempest could leave one drenched and exposed. I had contacted a lawyer, a quiet man with an analytical mind that could slice through the most knotted issues with surgical precision. He understood the nuances of HOA regulations and the broader implications of discriminatory practices hidden beneath layers of ostensibly benign rules. Together, we crafted a response that was not only legal, but moral. It was a strategy grounded in empathy as much as in law, aimed at untangling the threads of division and weaving them into a fabric of community. My lawyer emphasized the need for resolution that leaned towards education rather than retribution, a sentiment I shared. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched across the neighborhood, reaching like fingers trying to grasp an elusive truth. I watched from my window as neighbors went about their routines, their faces masked in expressions of unease and curiosity. Karen's house stood across the street, a fortress of solitude in the gathering dusk. Its facade was as pristine as always, but to me it seemed to pulse with an air of defiance. In a way, we were both architects of our domains, but our designs had led us on divergent paths. A letter was dispatched, its contents clear but compassionate. It highlighted the legal missteps, the potential for sanctions, but also offered a path forward: mediation, education, a chance to build bridges rather than walls. The response, if any, would take time. But I was patient. I had planted a seed and would wait to see what grew. Spring would come, inevitably, and with it, perhaps a thawing of hearts and minds long trapped in the frost of misunderstanding. In the stillness of the evening, I reflected on the act of saying, "Happy Holidays," a gesture of inclusion, now a catalyst for change. It was a reminder that words carry weight, capable of both division and unity. I sipped my tea, savoring its warmth. The future was uncertain, but my resolve was clear. This wasn't just about Karen or me. It was about the neighborhood, the community, and the values we chose to uphold. The night settled in, wrapping the world in its quiet embrace. I felt, for the first time in days, a sense of peace. The wheels were in motion. The story, not yet complete, was unfolding, one careful page at a time. The morning after the meeting felt like the dawn after a storm. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and cinnamon, remnants of a holiday season that had somehow become a battlefield. Yet, for once, my heart felt light, almost buoyant. The past few weeks had been a masterclass in absurdity, orchestrated by Karen, our neighborhood's self-appointed guardian of Yuletide purity. Her reign of festive terror had reached its climax the night before, and now the dust was settling. Stepping outside, I felt the crisp winter air surround me, wrapping me in a cool embrace. The world looked the same: snow blanketing the rooftops, wreaths adorning doors. But something imperceptible had shifted. There was a quietude, like the peace that follows a symphony's final note. I stood on my porch, surveying the world that Karen had tried so hard to control. Her desperate grasp for dominance had become a spectacle, a comedy of errors played out under twinkling lights and plastic reindeer. Neighbors had rallied, a tide of discontent rising to meet her rigid decrees. The meeting had been the crescendo, voices unified against her oppressive oversight. It was a small rebellion, understated yet potent, like tiny seeds breaking through concrete. Karen's face had been a portrait of disbelief, eyes wide with the shock of resistance. That image lingered with me, an emblem of change. I wandered down the street, past houses that seemed to exhale relief, Subtle signs of defiance had sprouted overnight. Menorahs in windows, kinara candles flickering, strings of blue and silver lights twinkling beside the traditional red and green. It was a patchwork of celebrations, each unique and beautiful in its own right. We were a mosaic of traditions and beliefs, a collage that Karen had tried to whitewash into uniformity. For the first time, I felt pride in our little community. Her reign had forced us to examine who we were, not just as individuals, but as a collective. Her shrill insistence on conformity had ignited something in each of us, a quiet determination to reclaim our voices, to celebrate in our own ways. Her vision of order had unraveled into something far richer, a tapestry of inclusion that she had never anticipated. As I reached the corner, I saw her. Karen stood on her lawn, arms crossed, glaring at the world with the intensity of a lighthouse beacon, scanning for ships to scold. Our eyes met for a fleeting moment, her gaze hard and unyielding. Yet beneath her bravado, I sensed something else. A flicker of uncertainty, a shadow of doubt. She was no longer the omnipotent enforcer. She was a relic of a fading season, out of step with the world around her. I offered her a nod, a silent acknowledgement of our shared humanity, despite the chaos she had sown. She turned away, her back a rigid line against the morning light. The world had moved on, leaving her to grapple with her own choices, her own reflections. Walking back home, I felt the weight of the past weeks lift from my shoulders. The air was crisp with new beginnings, carrying the promise of peace, of community restored. Each step felt lighter, buoyed by the knowledge that we had stood against the tide and found our way back to shore. Karen had been sidelined, not by force, but by the quiet strength of unity, by the quiet power of saying, "Happy holidays," and meaning it in every sense.